It's a real great privilege to come here and speak. Thank you so much, Malcolm, for inviting me. We were talking on Skype about, it must have been within the last month, and Malcolm said, how about you come and preach in Watford sometime? Yeah. So, hey, a real privilege. Malcolm's a great friend to me. He's what I'd call a spiritual mentor for me. So, we talk a lot about things in life. I talk a lot about things that I need help with, which I often feel are many. And it's great to have a good friend like Malcolm. I live in near Salisbury, right next to Stonehenge, in a little village called Amesbury. And I hail from the Thames Valley Church of Christ, which my mum and dad are involved in, and I'm sure many of you know my mum and dad quite well. Oge obviously is here, and I know Oge from a very long time ago. So my mum was actually baptised Oge. Is that right? Yeah, she baptised Oge. It would have been just over 15 years ago, and I would have been about 8 or something when I knew Oge. So there you go. I still have this memory of going to watch Terminator 3 at the cinema with Oge, and there's this moment when Arnold Schwarzenegger, he's been shot by this other Terminator, and he's got a fuel cell which powers him, and his fuel cell's like burning up. And he needs to get rid of his fuel cell. So it shows him taking off his shirt, cutting his skin, and he's going to pull out his fuel cell. And I was sitting next to Oge in Reading Cinema, and Oge saw this about to happen, and she looked at me and just, averted my eyes so I wouldn't see this gruesome sight about to occur. So that's my memory of Oge. So there you go, watching Terminator 3, being spared of violence before my eyes. So there you go. Thank you, Oge. But you don't remember that. No, Oge doesn't remember that kind of thing. No. Anyway, it's a real privilege to preach today. I'm really grateful that you'd have me come, and thank you for that. We're going to be talking a bit today about faith. One of the things that my job is to work as a dentist. I just qualified as a dentist. I finished in July. Thank you. It was God. It was not me. But that's what I do. And one of the things we do in dentistry, we have to do, and you may do this in some of your work, I don't know, but we have to do something called continuing professional development. Oh, terrible. So today my sermon is called Faith, C.P.D. Because at the end of the day, faith is a very important thing. Have a look in Hebrews chapter 11 with me. We're going to flick between Genesis and Hebrews 11 today. Faith is an incredibly integral thing to the Christian faith. It says in Hebrews 11 verse 6. Sorry, I've got a bit of a cold. I was ill last week, so I've still got the remnants of it. It says in verse 6, Hebrews 11 verse 6, and without faith, it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. Clearly, faith is pretty important. If it's not possible to please God unless we have faith, we want to make sure we've got faith. And maybe you're coming to faith for the first time today. Maybe this is a day you need some development of your faith. Faith CPD, here we go. Have a look in Genesis chapter 17. I've been reading, I've just finished the book of Genesis in my daily quiet times. And one character that has really stuck out to me is the character of Abraham. A tremendous man of faith, known as the father of faith in the Bible. And we're going to be looking at a couple of situations in Abraham's life which to me stand out within his life and stand out and show him to be a man of true faith, and also teach us what faith really is according to the Bible. He appears on the scene as Abram, so there's no extra part in the middle of his name at that stage. He appears in chapter 12 of Genesis, and he leaves his hometown of Haran, and he goes to a place where God tells him where he has no idea where he's going. And he has a couple of ups and downs in the next few chapters. He gets in trouble for lying about his wife. His wife Sarai, who he says is his sister, which is really half the truth rather than the whole truth, and he gets in trouble with the king Abimelech in that situation. But we're going to pick the story up in chapter 17. This stands a bit high, but we'll make do. We're going to start in chapter 17, Genesis 17, verse 1. It says, "When Abraham was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to him and said, 'I am God Almighty. Walk before me faithfully and be blameless. Then I will make covenant between me and you and will greatly increase your numbers.' Abraham fell face down, and God said to him, 'As for me, this is my covenant with you. You will be the father of many nations. No longer will you be called Abram. Your name will be Abraham, for I have made you a father of many nations. I will make you very fruitful. I will make nations of you, and kings will come to you. I will establish my covenant as an everlasting covenant between me and you and your descendants after you for the generations to come, to be your God and the God of your descendants after you. The whole land of Canaan, where you now reside as a foreigner, I will give you an everlasting possession to you and your descendants after you, and I will be their God.' Then God said to Abraham, 'As for you, you must keep my covenant, you and your descendants after you, for the generations to come. This is my covenant with you and your descendants after you. The covenant you are to keep. Every male among you shall be circumcised. You are to undergo circumcision, and it will be the sign of the covenant between me and you. For the generations to come, every male among you who is 8 days old must be circumcised, including those in your household, or bought with money from a foreigner, those who are not your offspring. Whether born in your household or bought with your money, they must be circumcised. My covenant in your flesh is to be an everlasting covenant. Any uncircumcised male who has not been circumcised in the flesh will be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant.' God also said to Abraham, 'As for Sarai, your wife, you are no longer to call her Sarai. Her name will be Sarah. I will bless her and will surely give you a son by her. I will bless her so that she will be mother of nations. Kings of peoples will come from her.' Abraham fell face down. He laughed and said to himself, 'Will a son be born to me, a man 100 years old? Will Sarah bear a child at the age of 90? And Abraham said to the Lord, 'If only Ishmael might live under your blessing.' Then God said, 'Yes, but your wife Sarah will bear you a son, and you will call him Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his descendants after him. And as for Ishmael, I have heard you. I will surely bless him. I will make him fruitful and will greatly increase his numbers. He will be the father of 12 rulers, and I will make him into a great nation. But my covenant I will establish with Isaac, whom Sarah will bear to you by this time next year.' When he had finished speaking with Abraham, God went up from him. On that very day, Abraham took his son Ishmael and all those born in his household or born with his money, every male in his household, and circumcised them as God told him. Abraham was 99 years old when he was circumcised, and his son Ishmael was 13. Abraham and his son Ishmael were both circumcised on that very day, and every male in Abraham's household, including those born in his household or born from a foreigner, was circumcised with him." So, you've got God here. God's talking to Abraham. And God says to Abraham, "I am going to give you a tremendous blessing. That is going to be, you're going to have descendants. All this land you see, you're going to live in. There's going to be hundreds of descendants. There's going to be so many descendants you're going to have." And this to Abraham seems a bit strange, because after all, he's 99, and not many 99-year-olds are able to have children. So he says, "God, are you sure this is right?" And it's interesting, isn't it? We think of Abraham as the father of faith. Surely, if he really has faith, faith looks a little different to this. Have a look with me in verse 17. It says, Abraham fell face down after he hears what God says. And what does he do? He laughs and said to himself, "This doesn't make sense." And at least that seems strange, doesn't it? Because surely faith should be, if we see this is the most faithful man in the Bible, his response shouldn't be, "Ha ha ha, very good God." His response surely should be different, shouldn't it? To me, that kind of like that's what I think. But then when we look at what faith maybe really means, we get a different idea. Let's have a look back in Hebrews 11. We're going to have a look at what else the Bible says about faith. Come on, Dawn. Hebrews 11, verse 1. Now, faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. This is what the ancients were commended for. How interesting, being confident of what you might not see. Interesting, isn't it? I don't think Abraham could see how God's promise was going to come true. I don't think he could see how what God said of giving him a son was going to happen. I don't think it was easy for him to imagine him having a son at age 99. So clearly faith isn't about things making sense. Faith isn't about things being easy to imagine, but faith is about something more. The title of my first point is, Show Me What Faith Looks Like. Well, let me show you what Abraham showed faith to be like. In verse 23, after God's told him, I want you to circumcise everyone in your clan, what's Abraham's response? Abraham already doesn't feel very confident about this, we can tell. So faith clearly is not about feelings. It's not about feeling confident. It's not even about things making sense necessarily. Let's have a look what it is all about. This is after God's given him his command. Verse 23, on that very day, Abraham took his son Ishmael and all those born in his household or bought with his money, every male in his household, and circumcised them as God had told him. So God's told him, if you obey me, it says in verse 2, walk blamelessly, or verse 1, walk blamelessly before me. If you do that, if you obey me, if you circumcise your children and yourself, I will bless you. Faith is clearly about trusting God, not just with how we feel, not with what makes sense, but with how we live. Abraham showed himself to be a man of faith, not because it made sense, not because what God was saying made sense to him, but because he was willing to go and live the way God had called him to live. And he was willing to obey God regardless of how ridiculous it might have seemed. I don't know how for you in your life, being a Christian and having faith in God can seem ridiculous. I remember when I'm 23 now, and when I was younger, I was baptized when I was 14, and I was at a school which heavily emphasized the sciences and maths. And as I got a little older, I started to realize that a lot of my sort of contemporaries, my fellow students, didn't like the idea of being a Christian very much. They were very academic, went to school with some very, very intelligent people. And they were very, some of them, not all of them, but I had some friends. But some of them were not, they didn't like the idea of being a Christian. And we used to have debates over science and things like that, and debates about why the Bible was true. Obviously it is, but debates, why it was or wasn't true. And I remember going through a time in my life where I just felt like there's so much that doesn't make sense. So much about God and how can this be true in the Bible and science be true or whatever, how can this all be true, which really tested my faith. And I remember coming to a stage towards the end of my first year at university where I had to really accept that part of being a Christian would mean that I would have to accept that I wasn't going to understand everything. Things weren't going to make sense as Ben Danner wanted them to make sense. Things weren't going to make sense as I wanted them to make sense. There's a part of being a Christian that means accepting things on God's terms, not just on our terms. I don't know what it is for you. Maybe you're not a Christian. Maybe you're thinking about this whole God thing and you feel like, you know what, I would believe, but there's still things that don't make sense to me. Now, I encourage you, do some research. If that's you, do some research, please. Research is a great thing. Read some books about apologetics and evidences. They're great things. But at the end of the day, are you willing to take a leap of faith? There's going to be a time in your life where God's going to say something, and he's going to want you to do it, he's going to want you to believe, and it's not going to make much sense. That's a really important part. If we're going to be Christians, if we're going to really be people, we're going to have to make a choice to trust God when we feel like we really, really don't want to. And that's going to be times as well when it's not going to seem clear. Maybe you are a Christian, and maybe you're looking at your life and thinking, I look at the life of these people in the Bible, and you see so many people becoming Christians. You see people, 3,000 baptized in a day. I don't know what it is. And you look at your life and you feel like, I haven't baptized someone in a long time. I think Abraham would understand how you feel. He'd feel like, I'm 99 and I'm meant to be having a son. That doesn't make sense. But if God can give Abraham a son, which he does, we're going to come on to that in a bit. God gives Abraham a son. If God can give Abraham a son, can God help someone become a Christian in your life? The answer, of course, is yes. The fact is, for all of us, we're not doing this because of us and we're great Christians and incredible at studying the Bible with people. Amen. We should try and be as good as we can be and be excellent at that. But it's not about that. It's not about being, incredible at, preaching and, studying the Bible. It's not about that. It's about what can God do in your life. And it's really about us believing God can do something great in our lives, even when it seems like he's not necessarily going to. That's what it's about. It's about believing, even when sometimes it doesn't quite make sense. Let's go forward to Genesis chapter 22. Abraham has his son Isaac. He's blessed. He has no son initially, and now he's given the ultimate treasure of a son. I can imagine for him that would really have been cloud nine. I've arrived. I've finally, after all these years, I've got a son. And we're going to read on here a very famous passage in the Bible, which is going to talk about kind of God's what God does next in Abraham's life, and how his faith has to go to an even greater level than it ever has before. Verse 1. Sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to him, Abraham, here I am, he replied. Then God said, take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain that I will show you. Early the next morning, Abraham got up and loaded his donkey. He took with him 2 of his servants and his son Isaac. When he had cut enough wood for the burnt offering, he set out for the place God had told him about. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. He said to his servants, stay here with the donkey while I and the boy go over there. We will worship and then we will come back to you. Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and placed it on his son Isaac, and he carried the fire and the knife. As the 2 of them went on together, Isaac spoke up and said to his father Abraham, Father, yes, my son, Abraham replied. The fire and the wood are here, Isaac said, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? Abraham answered, God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son. And the 2 of them went on together. When they reached the place God had told him about, Abraham built an altar there and arranged his wood on it. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then he reached out his hand, took the knife to slay his son. But the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, Abraham, Abraham. Here I am, he replied. Do not lay a hand on the boy, he said. Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not only withheld from me your son, your only son. Abraham looked up, and there in a thicket he saw a ram caught by its horns. He went over and took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called that place, the Lord will provide. And to this day it is said, on the mountain of the Lord it will be provided. The angel of the Lord called to Abraham from heaven a second time and said, I swear by myself, declares the Lord, that because you have done this and you have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as stars in the sky and sand on the seashore. Your descendants will take possession of the cities of their enemies, and through your offspring all nations on earth will be blessed, because you have obeyed me. What an amazing, amazing chapter. God has blessed Abraham already at this stage. He's given him his son. I'm sure Abraham's pretty fired up. But God says, if we're going to make this real, Abraham, we're going to have to go to the next level. I want you to sacrifice your son to me. That must have been hard for Abraham to hear. You know, he's just had the ultimate blessing from God. And now God's saying, yeah, I gave it to you. I want him back. Abraham might well have felt, God, this isn't fair. You just gave this boy to me. What are you doing? You trying to just make this as hard as possible? Are you trying to make me, wallow in, discouragement and negativity because you're taking away what you just gave to me? Have you just given me something and then you're going to take it back? I think it would have been tempting, very tempting, for Abraham to feel like that. What about for us in our lives? When are we called to sacrifice something which we've been given, perhaps? God's given us. I remember for me, there was a time where, at dental school, so not that long ago, about 2 years ago, I had a situation where I had a friend I was treating in dental school, and when you're at dental school, obviously you're not qualified to treat someone alone. So you have to have someone watching, like a mentor who comes and checks your work every now and again. And this situation came up with this mentor where this basically, the person who I was treating had a tooth that was stuck behind another tooth. One of his back teeth, his wisdom tooth, was stuck. And we were concerned that because of that, his tooth in front was going to get decay because he wouldn't be able to clean the tooth in front. I don't know, I hope that makes some sense. But we were concerned about that. But the problem was that my supervisor didn't think that he would be able to have something done to this tooth behind, like take it out or some of it chopped off, not up, some of it chopped off, unless he had pain in that tooth. Now, my friend didn't have any pain in that tooth. But my friend really wanted to have something done. So my supervisor says, okay, I want you to write a letter to the oral surgery department, and there's a consultant in oral surgery, and I want you to tell him this person's suffering from pain from this back tooth because we want to get this taken out. And it was one of those times where I remember thinking to myself, if I'm going to be a Christian here, I can't simply say, I'm going to lie. It's not a situation, we know that many in the world, lying is seen as cheap as chips, right? White lies to make a job interview go better, White lies to make someone feel better. Lies to make yourself look better for the sake of, something. It's what the whole world is built on. But as a Christian, I felt like, I can understand why I'm being asked to do this, but I really don't feel good about doing this. This is not something that sits well with me. According to what I know of the Bible, I do not feel good about doing this. And I had to make a sacrifice and say, no, I'm not going to do this. And my teacher gave me an absolute roasting. He was like, if this goes to court, I will not defend you. And I was like, I was so challenged. I was like shaking. I was shaking like, oh. And I was so challenged. But for me, that was a time where I had to decide, am I going to sacrifice for God here? Am I going to make a choice to be blameless and obey him? Or am I going to make a choice to not put his covenant first? Am I going to make a choice to just go along with what's easy? Go along with everyone else? That was a choice I had to make. What about for you? What about in the workplace? Are there times where conversations are going on which you don't feel good about, and you don't feel good about being with people who are having those conversations, or you don't feel good about condoning those conversations? Maybe you're at school. Maybe you have friends at work or at school or in your neighborhood who you don't feel good about doing certain things with them that they do. And maybe God's saying, I want you to sacrifice some of those friendships for me. Or at least be ready to sacrifice those friendships by saying, all those things that I used to do, I don't feel good about doing. Maybe that's something that God is calling you to sacrifice. My second point is all to do with this, and it says, put your faith where your mouth is. Obviously that comes from the phrase, put your money where your mouth is, and obviously that's something that you'll probably hear in Las Vegas rather than in Watford on a Sunday morning. Obviously the whole sort of poker scene is all about having some money, something, putting it all in, and then reaping a greater reward, or maybe losing everything. And that's what God is putting here in Abraham's situation. God is saying to Abraham, I want you, Abraham, to go all in. And what does he say when Abraham goes all in? Abraham goes all in. He gambles the apple of his eye, his son. He puts it on the line. And God doesn't take it away. Abraham doesn't end up with nothing. God says, I see now that you fear God. And what does God say? In verse 16, I swear by myself, declares the Lord, that because you have done this, you have gone all in, and you have not withheld anything, your only son, I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as stars in the sky and as sand on the seashore. Abraham goes all in, and he doesn't lose, he wins big. He wins really big. And that's just like the situation that we as Christians have right in front of us as well. God calls us to sacrifice things. And it reminds me of a verse Jesus says, where he says, anyone who has left fields or father or mother for me will receive back 30, 60, or 100 times more in this age, so now, in our lives, and in the age to come, probably heaven. That's what Jesus is offering. It's funny, isn't it, how all the way from the Bible, back in Genesis, and in Jesus' time, 2,000 years later, and now, the message is still the same. Isn't that amazing? But that's what God is offering. God calls us, as if you're going to be a Christian, to sacrifice your life, to give up Ben's idea of a good life, to give up, I can no longer be the Ben Dannett of my life. I've got to be the Jesus version of Ben Dannett, right? We've got to be the Jesus version of ourselves. That's what God's calling us to do. But the amazing thing is here, when the odds are stacked against us, when we choose to be Christians, God comes through. That's the incredible thing about it. We're not on our own here. There'll be going to be times when we feel way out of our depth. But if God comes through, we can be sure that He is going to come through in a way where we'll feel like, of course, it was the right thing to do there. Looking back and thinking, I'm so grateful for that. I remember, I think of my dad. My dad's a great man, and someone he's a great man. And I look back and I think all the times he used to sacrifice for me when I was young. I used to say, when I was young, I was very ungrateful. I look back and I think, man, my dad sacrificed so much for me. I used to like cricket, and I used to sort of go, I used to want to play cricket. I was like 13 or something, and my dad would come down and play cricket with me. And now I realise, I don't think my dad really liked cricket that much. But he still played with me. And there were times when I was young, and my dad would always put me and my sister, it's weird, side note, there's a Ben here and there's an Alice here as well in this congregation. They're both in class now, but my sister's Alice and I'm Ben. Really weird. But my dad would put so much time aside, not for himself. I never ever saw my dad watching a TV program by himself. He was always with me. And my sister and my mum, we were always spending time together. And it's funny, but I look back and I think, wow, he really sacrificed for us as a family. There were times when we were short of money and we used to go on holiday, and my mum and dad, there wasn't enough money for me and my sister and my mum and dad to all eat. So we used to, buy fish and chips for me and my sister, and then Dad's dinner would be to finish our fish and chips. That would be it. And, after we'd eaten. And I look back and I think, Dad really sacrificed for me. But I look at our relationship now and I think, I'm so glad he did that, because my dad is such a great friend to me. Such an incredible friend. And his willingness to sacrifice for my good has meant that we are so close now. And I think that, there's no way I would exchange, what he's done. I feel like probably the fact he sacrificed makes our relationship better than it would have been if he hadn't done so. And because of that, I really feel like that's an example of sacrificing, but God giving something so much better in return. I don't know what it is for you in your life today. Maybe there's something that you've got to change. Maybe you're looking at the Bible, you've been reading your Bible, and you feel like, if if I'm going to be a real Christian,